Today on Think Smart with TMFG, Mike and I are going to be reviewing with you 20 questions to think of if you're thinking of retiring. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to score yourself. If you've thought of that question and you've got a plan, give yourself a 1. If you haven't thought of it, don't have a plan, give yourself a 0. We're going to go through all 20 questions and then score yourself, and at the end, we'll tell you what your results should be if you think you're ready for retirement.
So we're doing no half points here, right?
No half points.
Just 1 or 0.
1 or 0.
Yep.
Okay, so let's get started. Number 1, have you updated your financial goals in the last couple of years? Do you even have financial goals? So if you have, you get a 1. If you haven't, give yourself a 0. Number 2, have you developed a detailed financial plan in the last couple of years? So a detailed plan is one that's cash flow based. It has basically what you're projecting your income to be, your expenses to be in retirement, and you've taken it out to the end of your life.
Very different than these pie-in-the-sky plans where they say, how much do you want to live on? Here's how much you have to save. This actually goes into how it actually works and how you're saving toward that.
So those are the first 2. Next one, if you've done that plan, you should have a Monte Carlo success rate of at least 75%. So what is a Monte Carlo success rate, Mike?
It basically looks at, it's very easy to go and assume you're going to hit retirement. If we knew what the returns were going to be, we knew when you're going to die, we knew all these different details, financial plan would be the most simple thing in the world. Unfortunately, we don't know when you're going to die. We know about what the return rates are going to be, but it's going to have a lot of variations in that, and we don't know what that is. A Monte Carlo simulation basically goes and runs a bunch of simulations, of 500 or 1,000 simulations of things that can happen between now and when you pass away, and looks if there's any financial crisis or any shortfalls along the way. And it gives you a realistic view as to what your future will look like.
Next up is savings. So I want you to think of these questions are all tied around savings. And do you have a good savings plan in place? The best time to be doing saving, I shouldn't say the best time to be doing savings. The only time you should really dramatically focus on saving is just before retirement. Yep. You want to put as much money away as you possibly can before you turn that income off that you've been used to your entire life.
There's a golden 10 years in there that's usually once the kids have went to school and your mortgage is paid off. And what you have to do is you have to take all those expenses you had when you had the kids and when you had the mortgage, and say that was costing you, let's say it was $8,000 a month. You have to go and take that $8,000 a month and have it go right into savings. And that's going to get you ready for that retirement.
Even if it doesn't have time to compound, even if that's the emergency fund that you create for the first 2 or 3 years of living expenses, that's huge. So here's the 3 questions. Do you have a monthly savings plan? Monthly means it's automatic and money's coming out of your bank account into investments every month, as opposed to I'll save when I think I want to save if there's money left in the account.
Do you know how many people say they save money, then they tell me what they bought with the money they saved that year? They're like, no, I save $1,000 a month. Well, I bought a jet ski. I'm like, well, then you didn't save the money. You have a jet ski.
Saving.
That's not saving.
That's just putting money aside for expenses. Number 1. Does the savings plan meet the objective? If you're supposed to be saving 20% or 15% of your income, are you actually doing that? So are you meeting your objective? And that's one of the things we run our clients through. Number 3, as you're getting closer to retirement, if you're making more money, are you increasing that savings? If your income's gone up by 5%, have you increased all your monthly savings by 5%? Or have you not even touched it for 5 years?
Particularly when people change jobs. Sometimes people change jobs and make a 20-30% difference in their income, and they keep the same savings plan. It doesn't work anymore.
Next up is debt. If you have debt, here's questions 7 and 8. Do you have a debt reduction plan in place? Yes or no? Number 2, will your debt be reduced to 0 at retirement?
If you do 30-year mortgages, it might be difficult.
Number 9 to 11, we're going to talk about the portfolio. So here are 3 things to consider about your investment portfolio before retirement and during retirement. Number 1, today you need a globally diversified balanced portfolio. It's pretty obvious that is the best option for a successful retirement.
Yeah.
I'm not saying which globally diversified portfolio you should have. I'm just saying you need one that's globally diversified and balanced. Number 2, Does it match your risk profile? If you get scared out of your portfolio during a market downturn, then it doesn't match your risk profile. So you need to make sure your risk profile matches your portfolio. Worth another point.
Yep.
Number 3, what are you paying in fees? Everyone pays fees to have their money managed. Even if you went to the cheapest index fund at a discount brokerage, you're still paying fees. What are you paying in percentage and dollars every year in fees?
Yeah. You know, going back to the diversified balanced portfolio, we talked about 2 things. We talked about one was the Monte Carlo analysis, and the second is a globally diversified portfolio. If you have your retirement in one stock, let's say you work for a company, that's all your money, there's no Monte Carlo that will work. It just doesn't work because the standard deviation on it is too high in any individual stock to make those Monte Carlos work. It could work out great, but because of the volatility in those returns, it doesn't work. You know, and we look at those stats of like the companies that were on the Dow Jones back 60 years ago. Most of them don't exist now, and that's why that Monte Carlo stuff doesn't work when you don't have a diversified portfolio.
I've always said every company goes bankrupt eventually.
Yep.
You just don't know when.
Yeah.
So next up is the estate basics, questions 12 and 13. Do you have an updated current will based on your wishes? You have no idea what your life expectancy is. I'd like to think and I can make it to 90, age 85, I'd be happy. Yep. I have no idea. I may not make it to the end of age 63. Do you have an updated power of attorney for both property and personal? If you do, you get a point. If you don't, you get 0.
Yep.
So we've now had 13 questions. How many points do you have? Now we're going to insurance. Everyone hates the word insurance.
Yep. It's inevitable,
but we wouldn't think twice about having car insurance. I mean, I guess some people do.
Yep.
But you wouldn't drive your car off the driveway if you didn't have insurance.
It's funny. I take the insurance off of one of my cars in the wintertime, and I'm always afraid to pull it. I'm afraid to park it somewhere different in my garage, right?
Right. Well, what if something happens to your house?
Yeah.
Is the car going to be covered?
Yeah.
So, number 1, do you have adequate life insurance? What happens if something happens to you or your partner today?
Yep.
So, you need life insurance in place. Do you have adequate emergency fund? Or do you have access to credit? So I've never had an emergency fund.
You need 6 months of your cash flow.
Right.
Basically in some type of emergency accessible in case you lost your job, in case anything happened, you need 6 months of accessible cash.
Now that seems like a lot. So do you have that money just sitting in a bank account somewhere? What else could you do? Line of credit. If you've got access to a $100,000 line of credit that you haven't touched, that's just as good as an emergency fund. If you need it, you're going to go to that in the emergency, and you'll pay it back when the emergency ends.
And you don't pay for it when you're not using it. It's a great use of capital.
Do you have adequate disability insurance? The chance of becoming disabled in that last 10 years, if you were going to retire at 65, between 55 and 65, there's a lot of things that can happen that can take you out of the workforce for a number of months.
I remember we said those are the years where you're going to do all your savings for retirement too. So those are the key years that you're going to build your retirement nest egg.
And you're the primary source of income. If you're not able to produce that income, you need that disability insurance. And lastly, in that last 10 years, there's a chance you get a critical illness. I'm a perfect example of that. Today, I got a critical illness 13 years ago. Wasn't expecting it. You and I had bought that critical illness insurance because we thought it was a good savings plan. Turns out I had to use it. Question 18, taxes. Are you taking advantage of all the tax breaks that are legally available to you?
Yeah, we pay enough tax in Canada where if you are entitled to a break, you should make sure you're using it.
Okay, if you are, you get a point. If you're not, 0. So I've got a couple of bonus questions for 19 and 20. If you've got kids' education, Mike, you're in the middle of it right now. I'm at the end of it. I've got, I think, 6 months left. You're right in the middle of it. Your daughter's just starting?
18 and 20-year-old. One's going to year 3. One's going to her first year. I think my RESP's maxed out about $160,000, $170,000. It should cover the majority of their education. And it was done as a monthly plan since they were born. Greatest thing ever because as they leave, it doesn't cost me any money.
Yeah. It's almost like you're paying the expense and you're getting money back from the RESP to cover the expense. It's huge. If you're trying to do that out of cash flow when you're supposed to be putting money away for your retirement, it's not going to work. One of them or both of them are going to suffer. And the final question, are both you and your spouse involved in financial decisions? Do you both go to the advisor for meetings? Do you sit down and at least discuss this thing once a year about your overall plan if you're doing it yourself? Even in our client base, we could probably say at least 25 to 30% of our clients do not involve their partner.
Just as an example, last week Rob and his wife came in for a meeting with me, just to, and Rob obviously knows his financial situation, but it's good to sit down with both parties and have them ask questions and know where everything is and how everything works.
So you should now have your point tally. There's 20 questions. If you're 15 and above, you're in great shape. You've done a really good job. You're staying on top of everything. If you're between 10 and 15, you probably really need to put some focus on this, some energy. And if you're between 0 and 10, wow, you got a lot of work ahead of you. You absolutely need to see an investment professional.
Yeah.
Because you can't just stop work one day and have everything work out. It's not easy. You've got to get everything lined up in place. That brings us to the end of another week. This is Rob and Mike with Think Smart.